You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp. My guest today knows a lot about pulling the tarp. Longtime minor league baseball front office executive, Jason Dambach. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's good to be on a podcast named after something that I'm very familiar with, pulling the tarp.
Well, I know you're very familiar with it. I'm familiar with it as well. I always tell people that this show is not about baseball. It's not about minor league baseball, but its roots are in an experience that I had in minor league baseball. My listeners know this story very well. You know, I did a summer internship working in minor league baseball. I thought I was going to learn the front office of sports. And there I am spending that summer pulling the tarp with the grounds crew. I'm dressing up as the mascot. I'm setting up moon bounces. I'm parking cars in the lot, driving players' wives back to their condos. I'm doing everything. I'm pitching in all over. I'm selling merchandise in the stands. And what I tell people is, although I never worked in minor league baseball again, it was one of the best early career experiences that you could possibly have, because you learn to adapt. You learn to take on new tasks. You learn that there's no task above you. There's no task beneath you. We all have to pitch in to pull that tarp and do everything. Everybody from the team president and general manager all the way to me, the new intern. I know, Jason, you've held a lot of roles in minor league baseball. Started your career with the Altoona Curve, director of communications and a broadcaster there. You went on to hold the senior VP and general manager role with the State College Spikes, which I want to get into. You know, I love State College, and you built that from the ground up. And then you held this dual role as executive vice president and general manager of the Frisco RoughRiders, and continued your responsibilities with the State College Spikes. There is so much I want to get into. Jason, when you think about your decision to get, your first job in minor league baseball with the Altoona Curve, what were you going in expecting?
Well, I would say, like a lot of people, when I decided to get into the business, I can't say that I really knew what I was getting myself into, much like what you just explained there, Andrew. When I first got into minor league baseball in 1999, my dream was to be a Major League Baseball play-by-play broadcaster. And so when I signed up to be an intern for this new AA franchise in central Pennsylvania called the Altoona Curve, the AA Pittsburgh Pirates, I thought, okay, well, this is great. I'm going to go down, I'm going to show up, I'm going to research player information, I'm going to talk to the players, hang around the batting cage, go up, write my scorebook, broadcast the game, and go home. And I still remember my very first day. I walked in. I started in May, so the season had begun in April. So very much everybody was in mid-season form except me. And, I walked in with my scorebook and my nicest pair of khakis that I had and my one Altoona Curve polo shirt that I had. And, I thought I was just going to be preparing for the broadcast that night. And it was about 2:00 in the afternoon, and it started to rain, as it does quite often most places in the United States during baseball season. And so you go put the tarp on. And I heard a tarp call over the radio, and I thought, okay, well, this is just going to be like, what you see on TV, these 10 guys that, live, in the grounds crew pit, and they're ready and available at all times to put the tarp on, and they take care of the field and pull it on and off. And all these people start changing into their shorts and T-shirts in the front office, and I didn't know what was going on. And one of the folks said, "Hey, buddy, you're on the staff now. You got to come pull tarp." And I had no idea what I was doing, but it was the first of probably 1,000 tarp pulls that I did in my career. And what I found was, not only the analogy, I know what you're trying to do here and talk about things beyond the job description, but I think it's important when you look back on any position to, be able to find these small moments that allow you to show other employees, how much you care, what your attitude's about. That it's usually in those types of settings, and usually it's when you're just starting out, when it's sometimes the little things that impress people. And throughout my career, then it got into management, and I started to take notice. Well, who were the ones that were really excited about coming down and pulling the tarp? Sometimes we'd have to show up at 7 o'clock in the morning on day 7 of an 8-game homestand, 12 hours before the game to do it. Who were the first ones there? Who was excited about it? So it became sort of a litmus test for me moving on throughout my career, but certainly something I'm very fond of.
Jason, I will never forget my first day. It was a sunny day. We did not pull the tarp on and off the field that day. We're told to expect it. But my project on the first day with a couple of other interns was we had a new sponsor sponsoring the cup holders at all of the seats, about 6,000 seats in the ballpark. So we needed to go through and take the old sponsor label off all 6,000 cup holders and put a new label on to all 6,000 cup holders. So we learned pretty quickly that the job description was going to be pretty expansive in terms of the other duties as assigned. I'm wondering, Jason, you show up ready to learn the broadcasting side of the business. How did you balance all of these other responsibilities while also at the time trying to develop yourself as a broadcaster? Because at that point, you were focused on being a broadcaster.
Yeah. And, these were, I guess I would still call this a little bit of the Wild West days of working in minor league baseball. Even if you worked in Major League Baseball or the NBA or the NHL or the NFL back in the late 90s, front offices certainly weren't as robust as they are today. Certainly not, from a sales standpoint. We all know there was no social media back then. So you didn't have social media marketing teams. You didn't have partner service people who were involved in the sales effort. They didn't really sell. They were the ones that sort of executed the sales contract. So there were a lot of these silos that we see today in the sports industry or in business in general that didn't really exist at that point. And so it was still very much a great opportunity for me to not really live in a siloed world or to live in one department. It was very much an environment where everybody did everything. Everybody sold. Everybody did mascot appearances. Everybody was at the gates handing out programs, cleaning up spills on the concourse, whatever the case may be. And so, I think that very much allowed me to grow organically into a role and, quite frankly, be pushed by my bosses into roles that, I wasn't I may not have been super excited about, but because I sort of dove into the deep end, it showed me, hey, this is an important part of the business. And if I want to continue to work on the craft that I really want to work on, which is broadcasting, I want to be able to earn a living at doing it. And so to be able to take on these other responsibilities became a way for me to, justify my ability to broadcast the games. And so, that's something that really nobody pulled me aside and told me that, but I was really able to figure out that, hey, if I get really good at selling, if I get good at designing the paper and becoming the one person on our staff that knows how to design creative content or video board ads or edit radio commercials or whatever the case may be, that if I had that ability, it would provide a lot of job stability and job security. And so, I was very fortunate in that the bosses that I had just continued to give me more and more responsibility and allow me to grow organically to the point where 10 years later, I became a general manager of a team, which was not something that I necessarily had set out to do, but because I had been given all these other roles and responsibilities and was willing to accept them, it certainly made me a very well-rounded person in the business.
Being a well-rounded person, I think in business, in any business, is more important, Jason, than ever before. I mean, it seems like, many of these, there is some specialization in any industry, but it seems like more and more, some of the most valuable people are the ones who can play in different parts of the business, can drive collaboration between different departments. I've always thought about the experience in minor league baseball and mine, obviously, much shorter than yours. It was only one summer. I never forget it. And I think about it all the time. And I think about what I didn't realize at the moment was what a unique career experience it was. And that it was teaching me maybe not how to park cars. It wasn't teaching me how to set up moon bounces. Although I do have to set up some blow up toys for my kids every once in a while. What it was teaching me was that trying new things and taking risks and going to places that maybe you didn't know all the inner workings was okay. and that you can figure it out on the fly. Talk about that for a moment.
No, that's very important. And that's a big piece of advice that I give to young folks looking to get into the business. That was something that I always enjoyed in my time as a GM over 10 years, was spending time with our intern class and trying to really give them some wisdom and help them understand that whether they went into the sports business or they went on to some other professional field, to give them some advice on, how to not just climb the ladder, but how to really become a well-rounded person and a well-rounded individual. And, that's certainly something that minor league baseball taught you and I. But as I mentor young folks, and I recently had a business where young folks coming out of college, in college, a couple years out, would come to me and look for career coaching, essentially. And one of the things that I always made sure to impart on the folks that I was working with, or at least encourage them to think about, was to look at an opportunity that would give you the ultimate inflexibility to learn all facets of a business. So that's why I love pushing people to minor league baseball, because when you intern or take a part-time summer job with a sports franchise, particularly, minor league baseball, you have the opportunity to dabble and kind of spread your tentacles into all different parts of the organization. I know not every opportunity is that way, and it could even be in the corporate world as well, but not to be so fixated on one path. I think that's one mistake that a lot of people make when they try to get into the business is and it is important, I will admit it's important to have a goal and a focus, but much like my story, I really wanted to be a professional broadcaster, and that was my goal, and I got to do that. I got to hone that craft and broadcast and get to the point where I thought I was a major league broadcaster, but I also understood very early on that may not end up happening. And so I need to diversify my skill set so that I can continue on in the business if that doesn't work out. And I think that's the number one. And I think now as folks get into particularly the sports industry, if we can just talk about that for a minute, I think whether it's the college professors and their sport management programs, or I'm not sure where this comes from, but a lot of them come in with a very narrow focus and they're not really willing to deviate outside of that. And I still think it's really important to find an opportunity as an intern or an entry-level position that allows you to really learn all facets of the business and have a boss that understands that, you like working in this industry, but you're not quite sure maybe exactly where you want to get to right off the bat.
I also think one of the important things that I didn't know at the time, but I understand now, is, to me, no matter what you do in life, whatever career path you take, there's always an element of client or customer service in almost every role. And there's almost always an element of sales and marketing. You either have to sell yourself and pitch yourself in life and in business throughout your career, or you're pitching or selling something. And what I always remember about the time in minor league baseball was that it was really like those two things were so central. The customer service and the customer experience were so critical, as was the sales and marketing. In many instances, you were essentially like a small family business in a local town, and you were putting a product on the field every night. One of the distinct memories I have is the general manager of our team telling us that he gave some number, some exorbitant number about the number of fans that don't know the final score when they walk out of a minor league game. And he said, at the end of the day, we're in the customer service business. We're in the entertainment business. We're here to make sure families and friends have a good time. They see some fun stuff on the field. They see their kid run around doing a dizzy bat race. They get some beers that are less expensive than in a big league park, and they have a great time. And that's job, number one. What's going on with the big league club or with the players is really the major league organization's responsibility. We're in the customer service and entertainment business. And that's something I've taken with me, because I've thought about some of the things that we did back then that were part of our culture and part of the way we operated. Everybody carried around, on the first day, the director of operations at the stadium gave everybody this little notebook and a pen. And it was a notebook that could fit in your back pocket. And he said, carry this around. And if you see something amiss, write it down. It will fix it first off. But if you can't fix it right on the spot, write it down. And if you have an idea or you see something that we can do better in the future for the fans, write it down. So we were like a take notes, write down type of culture. But I'll never forget that. And now that's the way I approach any business meeting, any conversation. I'm looking for, anything I can do to make, the client or the customer's experience better. What did you take from your minor league experience about, both the customer service and the sales and marketing piece of it?
I would say I took two things away. Both of them were really impressed upon me, impressed on me by my boss, a guy named Todd Parnell. He actually runs the AA team in Richmond, Virginia right now, the Flying Squirrels. And he had a couple of mantras that we always talked about, kind of expanding on what you just said. He would always say, we're not in the baseball business, we're in the memory making business. So he took it even one step further, but all throughout the entire season, off season, it was very important that we all understood that we weren't in the baseball business. We were a sales and marketing company that just happened to sell this product of baseball. And you could say that about, a lot of folks. If you work for a bank, you work in customer service or marketing, you're not in the banking business. You're in the relationship, the customer business. And the same thing with sports. One of my biggest turnoffs probably is when you talk to a young person in the industry and they go on and on about how they work in the baseball business or the football business. Well, most people don't, unless you're in coaching or you're in a front office position where you're making player personnel type decisions. Your job responsibility is sales and marketing, customer service, and memory making, and really putting the clients first. So that was the number one thing. The other mantra that he impressed upon me and everybody, and something that I then, when I became a general manager, it was something that was really important for me and became sort of a hallmark. And that was this concept of living it. And what living it meant was that, hey, look, we all know that, your work hours might be from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or, in the case of anybody that works in professional sports, in baseball, it could be, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., 7 days a week. However long you were actually on the job at the ballpark or doing your job, that wasn't when your responsibility to promote and sell and market the team ended. The expectation was always that, hey, if you went to the grocery store on Saturday on an off day, that you'd wear your team logo, or you would always carry pocket schedules or promotional materials in your front seat and make sure that the gas station or the supermarket or the flower shop had team promotional materials there. The expectation was if you were out at the bar on Friday night chatting it up, you were talking to people over beers about the experience of coming to a game. And so this concept of living it 24/7 is something that, look, I know there's a lot of movements out in the world right now, but I do think that if you want to be a good employee and you want to impress your bosses, being able to show them that you care about your job 24/7, it doesn't mean it has to overtake your family life. It doesn't have to, consume it to the point where, you have no life, no time for being able to get away and do the things you enjoy. But it's just that the concept of just never turning off your promotional or marketing brain, and the little things that you can do to help your organization really are going to reflect well on you.
Well, and I would imagine, Jason, you and the success that you've had as a leader of some great professional baseball franchises, it speaks to your ability as a leader, that you could engender that passion in others, right? That others could feel that passion in you. Because I think living it, as you put it, is maybe not something that can be taught. You could say it's a mantra, but for it to actually happen and play out that way, people have to respect you as a leader. They have to be impassioned about the product that you guys are putting into the community. I don't say putting on the field, because you're putting it into the community. It's not the players. When you think about living it, like you said there, what for you, like, how did you determine if someone was going to live it or not live it when you were hiring people?
Well, it's a hard thing. It really is. But generally, the number one indicator of somebody that was going to be not necessarily just living it, but somebody that was going to be a really good cultural fit was somebody that during the interview process wasn't going on and on about themselves, but rather, how they felt they could make the team better, or what skills they would be able to bring to the table that would, set them apart maybe from somebody else that we might be considering. And just frankly, people that you could just tell that you could get along with. It's really hard in any corporate environment to be around people that are unhappy. We know that spreads very, very quickly. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. It takes a long, long time. It's probably why some owners, some managers have the philosophy of when they take over, they just want to get rid of everybody that was there before and bring in their new people. That wasn't something that our ownership groups believed in. I didn't believe in that personally. I always felt like, look, I can learn as much from the people that are in the position, particularly if I was, coming to a new team, that I could learn as much from them as they could from me. And that it wasn't until, you really got to know the people in your organization that you could, at that point, start to demand more, to demand the living it, to demand, that they spend their off days, promoting and marketing the team. So that takes a long time. It takes a while to get to that point. It does start in the hiring process, but it doesn't always come together. You need a little bit of luck as well. You need people that really buy in. But the number one thing is they've got to like you and they've got to respect you. And if you're not somebody that has their respect, then you're probably not going to be very successful at driving culture.
Driving culture, that's a great place for us to segue to the work at the State College Spikes. So you go from Altoona Curve to, you go up the road to the State College Spikes, a new minor league team in a community that I know well and well. It's Penn State University right there. It's essentially a football town. There's other sports trying to creep in for a little energy. But what you have is an amazingly spirited community, a community that's incredibly close knit, incredible energy, incredible spirit. How do you come into State College and how do you build that from the ground up and say, hey, we've got minor league baseball here? It's been a really, really successful story. You kind of got the ball rolling. Would love to hear a little bit about that, Jason.
Yeah, so right around 2006, the new team in State College came on board, moved into a beautiful new ballpark on the Penn State campus. It was actually the result of a very unique and first of its kind collaboration between a professional sports franchise and a major college athletic program. And so this ballpark was built on the campus of Penn State University. It was owned by our ownership group in Altoona. And so the two markets were only about 45, 50 miles apart. And so the idea initially was almost like a one front office, two location type of setup. And so all of us that were working in Altoona and building up that franchise were heavily involved in the build out of the State College Spikes brand. And that was a lot of fun. I think the biggest challenge for us, obviously, was anytime you come into a market that's so college centric, that revolves around one entity, which, let's be honest, Penn State University is State College. It is Center County, Pennsylvania. And so that created a lot of unique challenges, but also some really neat opportunities. And the one thing we really latched onto right off the bat was the fact that we knew that in the community like State College with a university town, it's very cyclical. The calendar is very predictable. It's based off of the school semesters. And of course, in the fall, it's football. The economy is rolling in the fall when 100,000+ people come into town. But there was this hole in sort of the community calendar from the beginning of June until early September, where there really wasn't a lot going on in the community outside of an event or two. And so we had a feeling that we would fit in that puzzle piece pretty well. And that's the result. That's what happened. It certainly, it hasn't been easy for anybody involved in that franchise, but credit to our ownership group and the people that put this deal together, because I think it was really a groundbreaking partnership and one that has now been duplicated across the country, in that you have a major college university and a private ownership group coming together, obtaining state financing to build a state-of-the-art ballpark.
How do you go about building that brand in the community, right? When so much of the community's brand is blue and white, it's Penn State. How do you kind of create an affinity for something that's fresh, that doesn't have all the history?
the first thing we did, we really didn't make, again, we didn't make it about baseball. There were a lot of times when we were putting together creative material or, advertisements. Goes back to the days, in the 2006-7 range, where you still relied on newspaper advertising, television advertising, radio advertising, sort of the traditional way of marketing before social media came about. And there were times where we barely would even put, the opponent in there. We would not focus on the baseball. It was all about fun. It was all about family. And when you live in a university town, you've got a lot of disposable income. You've got a lot of young families. And we really tried to latch onto that as much as possible. And as you know from your time working in professional baseball, the key is to reach the families, number one. And number two is to reach those community groups. And being in a major college university area, albeit not a big one, but there was a lot of opportunity along those lines. And that's something that we really latched onto. And again, we were very clear about who we were and what our brand was. It was not about baseball. When we were in Altoona, that was maybe a little bit different. It's a little bit of an old school town. Baseball mattered a little bit more. The affiliation with the Pittsburgh Pirates, who were only 90 miles down the road, that really mattered. But in State College, we knew that wasn't going to be the case because you had a lot of transient people, you had a lot of international people. And so it really became about, what our brand was. And that was about fun, family, and affordability.
Fun, family, and affordability. So then I'm curious, Jason, you end up now having a dual role. You've run the Frisco RoughRiders and the State College Spikes. Now you got, like, instead of 45 miles, you've got a whole, country almost in between these teams that you're running. How did that come about?
Well, our owner, Chuck Greenberg, who had owned the Altoona team, the State College team, he trusted me to be a general manager of his in 2009 in State College. And I was with him for 6 seasons in that role. And then late in 2014, he purchased the Frisco RoughRiders, AA affiliate of the Texas Rangers, located in Frisco, which, for those that don't know anything about the Dallas area, North Texas, it is a boom town. One of the fastest growing markets in the entire country. 10,000 people lived there in 1990. I think the most recent census had it close to 250,000 people living in Frisco. You had the Dallas Cowboys moved there. FC Dallas built a venue there. All these major Fortune 500 companies were moving that way. Obviously, to have a sports entity, a sports franchise in that market was a tremendous opportunity. And so Chuck purchased that team, asked me if I would be interested in coming down and running the day-to-day, but yet remaining involved in the operation in State College in an oversight supervisory role. And I jumped on the opportunity because one thing that I was really curious to see was how would our model of how we run teams and how we market, how we promote, how we build out a promotional calendar and do all the things outside the white lines to get people into the ballpark and build that affinity for the brand. How would it work in a major metropolitan market where, you've got all kinds of different distractions? And, certainly it taught me a lot more than I taught it. But that was a lot of fun because we moved into, and you talk about changing culture. The previous ownership group of Frisco was called Mandalay Baseball. Very successful, owned a number of minor league baseball franchises. They were a fantastic sales organization. I mean, nobody sold like that organization, but they never really invested a lot in the community build out, in marketing, in promotions, in fun, really, making the ballpark an entertaining place to be. And so that also presented a fun opportunity to almost have a blank palette. And I remember coming in there and they had never done a promotion, never had a giveaway, had never done celebrity appearances, had never done, dollar beer night. Really, they'd only ever done fireworks. And so I remember coming in January and sitting down with the marketing director, and I had a whiteboard in my office, and it was literally like pulling everything that I knew from 15 years in the business that had worked and throwing it on the whiteboard and putting it on our promotional schedule and seeing how it worked. And part of the fun of that was all the employees that had been there before that were working in non-sales roles that really always kind of felt like what they were doing, didn't always matter. To see how empowered they became and how much fun they started to have with the organization was a great thrill. And then the salespeople, they started to ingrain and be able to look at what they were doing a lot differently. And things really came together beautifully. And it's the team has been successful ever since. And I've got a couple predecessors since I've been there that have continued to make the experience in Frisco, Texas, one of a kind. And we had a lot of fun there. But, culturally, again, that was a good example of, you had one philosophy that had been in place for a long time, and a set of people that had been part of that philosophy. And we were all of a sudden coming in, and it was like, taking over a college football team that had been running the wishbone. And now all of a sudden we said, we're going to go 4 wide receivers and throw the ball all over the field. It's like there were some people that didn't fit in what we were doing. And there were others that were up for the challenge and really got it. So it was a fun opportunity to be a part of and to do it in a market that was huge, that had a lot of money and loved to spend money and loved to be entertained.
What a fantastic story, Jason. And I can't help but think as you describe all of that, success in Frisco and in state college, how much, of all the different experiences that you were willing to take on when you were just trying to crack into the broadcasting world in Altoona, your open-mindedness to take on new tasks, to try anything, to adapt, to dabble in different areas of the business, how well that has served you throughout your career. Jason, this has been so much fun. Keep pulling the tarp. I know once you pull the tarp, you are forever a tarp puller. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this week. Have a good rest of your week, my friend.
I appreciate you having me, Andrew. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of fun. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Instagram at AndrewMoses123 and sign up for my monthly email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.